under flood mitigation and flood damage restoration programs following the 1988 flood. Funds are needed under the flood mitigation program to raise low points in roads in Landsvale to improve access to allow people to escape the flooding, or alternatively to allow people who did not escape to be rescued. Extensions to voluntary purchase programs to cover more dwellings in the high hazard area and additional funding to finance those programs is required. Additional funds are requested for the restoration of flood damaged roads, drains and public properties. In addition, on this occasion, funds are requested to assist in the restoration of creek banks which slipped, causing hazard to private dwellings during the flood.
The house raising projects that went on after the 80s floods, it was decided at that time to negotiate with the state and federal governments for funding that people down in Landsvale whose houses were flooded probably nearly up to the ceiling line, that if they wished, with a subsidy from state and federal government, to raise their houses. A lot of people took up that offer and raised their houses. If you go down there and have a look, you'll see they're up about 2 metres or so in the air, some even more, depending on the level of the flood at the time. That was a great project. A lot of people took that up. Council then also had a volunteer purchase of the houses, where we purchased the houses and in some instances demolished those houses and never replaced them and left it as open space where it was flooded. Others, we demolished the houses and then sold the blocks, but with a development application that stated you had to have your house, the new house had to be built at least 2 to 3 metres up in the air outside the flood level.
We had a once in 20-year flood in the Georges River catchment and a once in 20-year flood in the Prospect Creek catchment. The size of the flood was related to the coincidence of those two flood peaks arriving at Landsvale at about the same time. We had quite a number of creek bank collapses, particularly in Prospect Creek. At Ramsay Street, Canley Vale, there were 2 properties affected by slips before this flood. That has now extended to cover 10 properties. Each of those properties has danger of losing outbuildings, and one a shed has already fallen and the bank subsidence is approaching the house, so that any progress of that subsidence could endanger the house. Slippage also occurred in Carramar in 2 locations, in Atkins Avenue and Waterside Crescent. Those places are not in immediate danger apart from garages or outbuildings, but obviously work should be done on those properties within 12 months, or it is possible that houses will be threatened in those locations as well. The highest single incidence of damage was actually to a concrete stormwater channel in Wetherill Park, where the water stripped concrete slabs off the side of the channel. At the downstream end of the concrete line channel, big areas of concrete wall have been stripped off, turned over and broken up. Even sections of floor have been turned upside down. The water entered into the channel through the ground behind the slabs, actually lifted the slabs or caused them to move, flowed underneath the floor, and the buoyancy of the water under the floor plus the suction of the water flowing over the floor has actually lifted the floor channels, broken a lot of them, cracked a lot of them, and actually overturned 3 or 4 sections of floor. A lot more of the wall slabs have been stripped off and turned over or dropped down behind the section of the floor that's been lifted up. The estimated cost of repairs to that channel is $332,000. The next most expensive repair job for the council is a bank subsidence or a bank slip at the council's depot in Orphanskill Creek at Canley Vale. That's a $70,000 job. And the third most expensive job will be repair of another concrete lined channel in St Elmo's Drain in Fairfield.
Also a project of what we call the Restoring the Waters, which was bringing some of our creek systems back to what they were in the 30s and the 40s and the early days of settlement in this area, where a creek would just meander in its own fashion through the paddocks and down into the Landsvale Peninsula. Over the years with house development in this area, at the time councils and the Water Authority felt it was better to build concrete trenches. And the only thing that this ended up doing was causing the water to run much faster through these concrete trenches and down into the Landsvale area, flooding Landsvale much quicker. With funding from the state government, this project, Restoring the Waters, which won many awards for us, we ripped out the concrete channels and brought the creeks back to aerial photographs that we had from the 30s and the 40s, back to their meandering way that they ran in the old days through the paddocks, which was a tremendous success, not only as far as slowing the water that ran down into Landsvale, but also bringing back the flora and fauna and the fish life that existed for many years before we concreted those creeks.
It's been a day of chaos in and around Sydney. Since 9 o'clock yesterday morning, we've had more than 200 millimetres of rain, the third highest April rainfall on record. Out west, Parramatta has been the worst hit, a virtual disaster area, with cars and homes under metres of water. Major roads in and out of the city have been cut by the floodwaters, leaving residents to find their own means of transport. At the O'Connell Street Cemetery, a large section of the wall collapsed onto the roadway. In nearby Rose Hill, a number of horses had to be taken to higher ground as the deluge flooded stables. Despite the emergency, there was time for a cuppa.
They've still got cars being swept away and people are still in the cars.
Long-time residents of Mayfield Road at Wentworthville say it's the worst flooding in 40 years. Many became prisoners in their homes. Others braved the swell only to find themselves trapped for hours. The Georges River in the southwest threatened a caravan park, forcing residents into temporary shelters. The Nepean River has burst its banks in many places. The SES is preparing for major evacuations. The scene in the northern suburbs is no better. Torrential waters have forced residents to pack away the valuables and at best try to stem the tide. Police have warned motorists to stay indoors as road surfaces deteriorate. One person has died, another 5 were injured in a car accident at Homebush. And even though the picture looks grim, Sydney's April showers haven't broken any records. While we have had the most rain in 117 years, it's nothing like the deluge back in 1861, when a massive 622 millimetres swamped the city. Anne Newton, National 9 News.
The telegraph pole out there was the ideal instrument to measure on. Because I am old-fashioned and it's also easier, it's measured in 1 foot increments up to 12 feet, because that's as far as I could reach off the ladder. It's also a lot easier at night with a torch to get half a foot than roughly 1/8 of a metre or whatever. And I can also evaluate how quickly the water is rising and pass that information to the State Emergency Service and let them know, and if necessary they might have to start taking action, evacuating people. We have to do that here simply because the area is not conducive to flood boats. So it's a case of wander around door knocking and trying to tell people, preferably before it goes through the house. That doesn't always work, but right. Just for your information, I have had egg on my face so often it's not funny. Fortunately, the neighbours humour me. Those that have been here some length of time know what I'm getting at. Because it can rise so quickly, you'll see the water rush up to a certain level, then it stops. But I can't guarantee that it's going to stop. So, as I say, we don't wait till it goes into the house. We try to get in before it goes into houses. Otherwise, it's extremely difficult for people to get out or move their furniture. We were fortunate when we built this house. The building inspector from Fairfield, who I thought was a very hard man, insisted that we have extra deep foundations and that we raise the living area another 3 courses of bricks. Having seen the new flood guidance thing for houses in flood-prone areas, that old bloke knew. So I cursed him at the time, but I'm thanking him now. The 88 flood was largely at night. From the time it broke the bank at the conjunction there of Prout Creek and Cabramatta Creek, it took 2 hours to reach the peak level, which was 10 feet on that pole. And needless to say, people were panicking. Because I'd lived through earlier floods, I'd had the experience, move the cars and all up to the top of the hill, open the garage door, let anything float that was going to float and virtually wipe off the rest. Basically, other than a few empty paint tins and things like that, we were fortunate. Our next door neighbours, unfortunately, were not. They've had a few occasions now, including that one where it's gone right through the house. With this area, and we've had a lot of trouble trying to get through to people, this area is not tidal, but when the Georges River floods and we have a coinciding high tide, it pushes the water back up. So we can very easily have 2 floods in one day, 12 hours apart.
In the Georges River Basin, the flood began receding mid-morning and locals began tackling the inevitable heartbreaking cleanup. Some 500 homes are reported damaged and the government has offered financial help with replacing essential goods and clothes. Stock losses are reported minimal so far, although dozens of animals died when floodwaters swept through this Milperra Wildlife Park during the night.
The most important thing that the community can learn from flooding and the information that SES does put out in pamphlets and booklets is that flooding can be very dangerous. Flooding in itself can be made easier by the community working with the SES. Our young children should never play in stormwater drains or any type of moving water. There is a danger factor there at all times. And always take notice of what the SES says. Listen to the radio reports, listen to the TV reports, and whatever SES informs the community to do, please follow those instructions. That not only makes it easier for us, the SES, but will make it much safer for you, the community.
evening.